Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Deb, and I'm from the New Hampshire Seacoast area. I'm co-founder of New Hampshire for Safe Technology, and my journey over the past 5 years, like many of us, is not anything I had planned, but has led me here today. A little about my journey into wireless. In the fall of 2017, we had scheduled to have our home measured for RF radiation on our return from a hiking trip out west. I had planned to come off blood thinners as I was aware that wireless could thicken the blood, so I thought this was a prudent precaution. I had also been having issues with insomnia, ringing in the ears, heart arrhythmia, palpitations, tooth and jaw pain, dry eye, facial flushing, dizziness, and blood pressure. I had developed severe pressure headaches that felt like my brain was swollen or on fire. I had great difficulty thinking, speaking, and remembering. I even got lost several times in the town I've lived in for nearly 40 years. I did not yet know it was all related until we removed the wireless from our home and cars. My health quickly improved. My seemingly unrelated symptoms disappeared as well. Interestingly, the plant in my kitchen that sat there doing nothing for over a year suddenly grew 15 inches in just 2 months. That was an eye opener to everyone in the family. It's so much easier to believe what you can actually see. While I was relieved and surprised at the recovery from symptoms, the reality of how I was going to actually live my life in this wireless world was a daunting thought. This is certainly not the retirement we had planned. Realizing this is an issue that ultimately affects everyone, I stepped out of my comfort zone, despite knowing others will certainly think I most definitely must be crazy, and reached out to legislators. However, my state rep, Patrick Abrami, was truly exceptional. He actually listened and responded. He investigated the science and was successful getting New Hampshire to pass the first US law to begin addressing technology safety. The New Hampshire Commission on Health and Environmental Effects of Wireless Technology was established in the fall of 2019 and produced a groundbreaking report in the fall of 2020. The New Hampshire Commission report is a great place to become informed, to empower you to protect yourself, your family, and community by becoming aware and learning how to use technology safely. We at New Hampshire for Safe Tech, along with Cece Doucette of Massachusetts for Safe Tech, are supporting the Commission's work and hopefully our communities by having these information sessions like this, and we thank you for being here. I'd like to introduce our speaker to you, Cece Doucette. Cece has been a tireless support of ours in New Hampshire, and we are so grateful for her. Cece helped her children's schools become the first in the nation to take precautionary measures with wireless technology. She's the director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology and works with schools, communities, municipalities, and legislatures to address wireless radiation and public health. She's also the Education Services Director with the international nonprofit Wireless Education, which offers affordable 30-minute online training for schools and families and for corporate safety. Cece was honored to co-chair the technology panel for the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference at the National Institutes of Health and to present state and local policy at the International EMF Medical Conference 2021. She's been featured on Genius of Wellness, Boston 25 News, PBS, EMF Warriors, in EMF Summits with Lloyd Burrell, Josh Del Sol, and Patrick Vanderberg, and in the films Generations Act and Wi-Fi Refugees. Please welcome Cece.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Deb. And we are just so grateful for everything that you and your colleagues are doing in New Hampshire. As we know, this is not an easy conversation to have because we've all become so dependent upon today's technology. So as we get going today, we just want to clarify that the message is certainly not no technology, but let's see how we can stay both connected and protected. So I'm going to do a screen share and I'll bring up a set of slides that I've developed. And Deb, can you see that okay? Okay, great. So that MTPW after my name just means that I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University. And as Deb mentioned, here's the little sign that we have in our school district here in Ashland, Massachusetts. We became the first in the nation 8 years ago to even have precautionary measures showing on our schools, our walls, and our classrooms. So turn things off when not in use, only turn the wireless on when you need it. We've gotten accustomed just leaving it as the default that all Wi-Fi all the time, and that's simply not safe. And then always place a mobile device on a solid surface away from one's body. Once our schools took a look at this, then I went and I worked with my state senator, who is now our Senate President, Karen Spilka, and we introduced legislation here. She put me with a lawyer in her office in 2014. In 2015, we introduced legislation, but for whatever reason, we haven't been able to get that legislation passed in Massachusetts, but thankfully, as Deb mentioned, in New Hampshire, things seem to move a little swifter, and we'll look at some of those specific pieces of legislation in a moment. On this journey, I've had the privilege of connecting with many of the world's leading doctors and scientists whose life's work is to investigate the biological effects of today's wireless technology. And we formed a little nonprofit initially out of Europe, and now it's out of Canada, called Wireless Education, where we have taken this huge issue and distilled it down into little courses that can be completed by an entire school district or an entire workforce in about a half an hour. We are in the process of transitioning those courses to a new platform, and we'll have that live again this summer. And then for the first couple of years, I didn't have anybody I could talk to about this issue. And then in more recent years, when we discovered that there are people all over the country and all over the world figuring out that wireless is so harmful, we founded Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And we do a monthly meeting to give updates on a town-by-town basis of the inroads that people are making in their own communities. So anybody is more than welcome to come join us for these monthly meetings as well. And as Deb mentioned, somebody down at the National Institutes of Health found my work and asked me to co-chair the technology panel for the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference. And I like to share this link because our talks were limited to about 10 minutes each. So I do opening remarks, and then we hear from the retired president of Microsoft Canada, Frank Clegg, who figured out what this issue is after he retired. And now he is devoted to helping Canadians learn about safe technology. We also had Dr. Martin Paul, who's one of the world's leading scientists. He came and gave a 10-minute talk. Theodora Scarato, who heads up the Environmental Health Trust, which is arguably the world's largest database and think tank with scientific and medical advisors. And then Peter Sullivan. And I came across Peter's work on a talk he was giving one time, where he had become very ill. He had been a former fighter pilot, and he had been up in, the stratosphere with the gamma rays and the man-made frequencies that were inside his fighter plane, as well as mounted on the outside with radar. And Peter got very sick. He started losing weight. His teeth were starting to break off. And he just got rail thin. And then when his two sons were coming on to the preschool years, both of his sons wound up on the autism spectrum. And in Peter's talk, I had never heard anybody say that you could get a child off the autism spectrum, but indeed, both of his sons are now grown young men, and neither one is on the autism spectrum anymore. And he will tell families, as your first action, get the wireless away. And then, of course, also take care of getting a clean organic diet, detoxing from the heavy metals, but get the wireless away. And time and again, we see children and adults begin to show signs of recovery, especially in the families where there are de novo mutations, which means the autism did not come from mom or dad's gene pool. It came from somewhere in the environment. So you're welcome to use these as highly credible, quick introductory lectures on the wireless radiation issue. And then one of the gaps that we had when I fell down the proverbial rabbit hole back in, gosh, I think it was 2013 for me, is that we didn't have any way of training our doctors and our nurses and first responders, and far too many were being misdiagnosed. And so I'm so grateful that in 2019, Dr. Lynn Patrick pulled together the first EMF medical conference. And then in 2021, Libby Kelly pulled together international resources again. And we have now this EMF medical conference 2021. We had to pivot and go online to a virtual platform because of the pandemic. And that medical conference, because the content is so highly relevant still today, has just been reaccredited. And now all of our healthcare practitioners can go get professional training on this for 24.5 continuing medical education credits. And there was a similar procedure that was undertaken to get the nursing credits as well as the doctor credits. So please know that if you're just joining this conversation today, you're very fortunate to be joining at this point in time, because we have incredible resources to not only help you come up to speed quickly, but your towns and your medical teams as well. So why did we become the first in the United States to even have that little sign in our classrooms? It was when our schools read the legal fine print. So if anybody with us today has an iPhone, I would welcome you to take that out right now. And we're going to take a look at the fine print. It's in there for all of our devices, not just the iPhone, but I can tell you exactly how to get to the iPhone. There's a website called See the Fine Print where you can look at some of the other legal disclaimers that have been in there all along. So once you're in your iPhone, go to Settings, and then from Settings, go down a little ways and hit General. On a really old phone, you'd hit About, but most people have upgraded. So from General, go all the way down to the bottom, and near the bottom, you'll see Legal and Regulatory. Once you hit that, you'll see a little list, and you want to take a look at RF exposure, which is radio frequency radiation or two-way microwave radiation that the industry politely calls energy in this fine print disclaimer. But what that legal fine print tells us is a couple of really important things. One, this device was tested at a distance from the body. So if you put that phone up to your head, if you tuck it in your bra or your suit pocket or your shirt pocket, or if you tuck it in your waistband or your back pocket, you are exceeding the FCC limits for public radiation exposure. And those, by the way, were never biologically safety tested for harm. The second paragraph recommends that you use a speakerphone or a headset, but you definitely don't want to be putting anything up to your head that's transmitting radiation. So those earbuds are a really bad idea, because you're putting a microwave transmitter on both sides of your brain, and it's going right through and into your brain. If you do need to use a phone in active mode, you might want to take a look for a hollow tube headset or an air tube headset. And that looks something like this. It's just got a hollow tube with only rubber and plastic up to your head. And then it's got a ferrite bead that breaks the radiation from coming up the wire out of your device. And it's got good volume control and stuff. So just little hacks that we can all learn to use our technology, but as safely as possible. So I had a hard time getting my mind around this invisible technology. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, is that we really do need to be vigilant about invisible toxic exposures. So my friend Wendy is the one who tipped me off that wireless could be harmful. She's an electrical engineer. And I went back to her and I said, Wendy, how do I get my head around this if it's invisible? And so we did a crude little experiment with an AM radio that if you put it between stations, you can hear the radio picking up the radio frequency transmission. So that was how I could first think about it. And then I learned there are actually radio frequency radiation detection meters on the market. that you can purchase. And so I thought, you know what? Let's see if we can get a grant for one for our public library. And it took me 3 tries. I had to educate every one of the members of our select board, and then I had to educate the members of our library trustees. But we ultimately became the first in the nation to put one of these devices on loan in our public library. So anybody with our library card can take it out and go home and measure, and then learn how to use the technology safely. In Newton, Massachusetts, a doctor and I went after a state level grant from our cultural council, and we became the second library in the United States to do this. Out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where Verizon turned on a cell tower on top of a neighborhood, and it made 20 children and adults sick immediately to the point where they ultimately had to abandon their homes, they also had put one of these meters on loan in the public library. So this one here on the right is called the Safe and Sound Pro 2, and that's the one that's recommended by the EMF Medical Conference for doctors to loan out to their patients. So I want to give a demonstration so we can all understand what this invisible toxin is like. So here in my home, knowing what I know, I have excellent technology. I have fast, safe, reliable technology. And you see it's in the green. And right now I'm getting a maximum reading of 5.78. Now the scientific literature indicates we want to be under 10. So that's pretty good. So remember, we were at 5. Now I'm going to take my cell phone out of airplane mode. I leave it in airplane mode as the default because I don't need the radiation to do what I need to do with my technology. This is the radiation from one device pulsing back and forth for a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router, okay? So I'm gonna put this back in airplane mode because I prefer not to be radiated, but I wanna tell you what it just did. It hopped from the safe green up to the extreme level. And just for the 2 or 3 seconds that I had this on, we went from 5 to 222,000 microwatts per square meter of radio frequency radiation. That is way beyond the extreme level. And most people are walking around with these on, pulsating at these levels, and have no idea of the damage that they may be doing to themselves or those in the vicinity. So what does the science show us? Just wanted to mention here, my local cable station's been very gracious. They came and did a 23-minute public service announcement where I do a walkthrough of my whole home just to show you common exposures. So you're more than welcome to look at that and get some ideas for how you might begin to remediate. So when we look at the science, first we'll look at the long-term effects. Deb, could you hit the mute button again? We're picking up somebody's audio. So adult and child cancers. So right here, we have the US National Toxicology Program. They are the gold standard in the world for toxics research. And they spent 20 years working on a study when cell phones were at 2G and 3G, or second and third generation. They went in expecting to prove that this type and level of radiation is fine. Instead, after an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the US National Toxicology Program at the National Institutes of Health, they determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. Now, clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories they can assign. And the industry, whenever there's a good study done, they'll come back and say, oh, that was just one study. You need to have other studies to show the same thing. Well, right as we finished up our study here in the US, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy completed another large study on cell towers, or what they call base stations. And they corroborated the same types of cancers that we found here in the United States. So we don't need more science. We can always refine science, but the science is very clear that this radio frequency is very dangerous. DNA damage, we know, is the roadmap to grow a proper anything from a child to a plant to a pollinator to any kind of a biome, and we are damaging DNA with radio frequency. The infertility studies are what caused me to find my voice on this issue. They have taken male human sperm, exposed it to a laptop with the antennas turned on, and it changed the DNA, it slowed the motility, and it caused far fewer sperm to be viable in just 4 hours of this radiation exposure. And my kids, we had just given my older daughter a laptop to go to college with, my younger daughter a laptop to go to high school with, and they're using them right on top of their reproductive organs. So that was when I started talking to my schools about this, because we've issued all of the children now in the pandemic these tablets to access their education with not one shred of safety training. So neurotoxicity, even before we were in the pandemic, we were at epidemic levels of anxiety, of depression, of suicidal ideation among children like we've never seen before. And then the ADD, the ADHD, Dr. Hugh Taylor heads up the OB/GYN program at Yale Medical. He has done studies on the rodents and exposed them to radio frequency when they're pregnant. And when the pups come out, they're bouncing off the walls, just like a child with ADD, ADHD would exhibit similar behavior. Here in Massachusetts at Mass General Hospital, Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab, and she sees huge connections between what we know scientifically is happening with wireless radiation and what she sees in the families in her care. Dr. Martin Paul just released a new paper this spring on Alzheimer's coming on at earlier and earlier ages. It used to take 25 years to manifest, and now we're actually seeing Alzheimer's in 20 and 30-year-olds. This is a neurotoxin. And just this past month, the Environmental Working Group, which many of you may know because of their work on pesticides, they've got the list called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen with regard to produce. Now they are taking on the wireless issue as well. And they just came out with an Environmental Working Group fact sheet on the effects of radio frequency radiation on the nervous system. So please know this is starting to come mainstream, but we cannot wait for public policy to catch up, because we are destroying an entire generation of children. And these children are not just little adults. Their bodies are still under construction. Their skulls are thinner. And so the radiation is penetrating even further into a child's brain. This is, these illustrations are heads that are sideways, where the yellow is the ear. When you put up a cell phone to an adult's head, it's penetrating into our brains about a third of the way through. On a 10-year-old, it's going about 3/4 of the way into the brain. And on a 5-year-old, it's penetrating the actual brain almost the entire way through. So children's central nervous systems are still under development. Their immune systems are still under development. And we are not taking precautions with our children until we learn a little more. And once we know better, we tend to do better. So those are many of the long-term effects. In the short term, we should know that our government, through the Americans with Disabilities Act and the JAN, Jobs Area Network, they already since 2002 have recognized there is a term called electromagnetic sensitivity. And many folks will recognize some of these symptoms, but perhaps never knew to connect the dots to the frequencies that we have surrounded ourselves with. But the good news is, once we know and once we decide to turn everything off, time and again, people come back and say, oh my gosh, I turned it off. I slept through the night for the first time in ages, right? Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines that doctors can't figure out start to go away when you remove this constant jackhammering of microwave radiation. Nosebleeds, ear bleeds. So for a long time, the industry would say, oh, there's no mechanism of harm identified. We don't know how this is happening, so it's not really happening. Well, now we know many different mechanisms of harm. With the insomnia, as part of our circadian rhythm, in the wee hours of darkness, in the middle of the night, our brain recognizes that it's dark. It releases the melatonin from the pineal gland. Melatonin goes in and regulates our sleep, and it also helps to remove the toxins of the day. Well, what our brain can't differentiate from is this light energy form that's microwave radiation, pulsing all night long. So our brain thinks the lights are on. So it comes as no surprise that once you turn this stuff off, the brain can finally go, and do what it's meant to do during the wee hours of darkness. With the headaches and the nosebleeds, there's something called the rouleau effect. And that's where normally our red blood cells would be free floating and oxygenating all of our vital organs, all of our systems. But what happens when you have this electric and magnetic field happening is the red blood cells glom together and they form this chain, kind of like a stack of coins, that then can't get to where it needs to be going to oxygenate our systems. So oxidative stress is a really big impact that this technology is having on us. Chronic fatigue, pain from unidentified sources, skin abnormalities. We have like little antennas in the surface of our skin that are very sensitive to this radiation. Some people complain about the hot ear when they put a cell phone up to their head. Others will talk about flushing, heating, tingling, nerve damage at the skin level. There's a gentleman who did our logo, Chuck, and he figured this out because the nerves in his leg were going jiggity, and it turns out that's where he was carrying his cell phone. So that's how Chuck figured it out. Heartbeats that go too fast or too slow. The heart, the lungs, the brain, these are all electrical organs. And when we overpower with a new man-made form of energy, all of our electrical systems, well, we can expect a lot of these abnormalities. Cognitive impairment, we talked about the earlier and earlier onset Alzheimer's, anger and behavior issues. We hope that many of you will attend that EMF medical conference. The general public can attend for just $39. The price has also been greatly reduced to get the continuing education credits. But one of the most heartbreaking statements that I heard more than one of the doctors indicate is that because we are radiating ourselves, we are changing the matter of the brain. And we are changing it in children and in adults in the areas where we used to make good decisions. And they were saying that because we are changing the structure of the brain, we can expect many more of these societal outbursts that we've been seeing with these mass shootings. Here in Boston, 3 Boston schools have recently reported the kids are beating on each other with their Chromebooks. It's awful, and it's all within our control if we have the courage to learn about it first and then do something about it. So, and it's not just you and I, it's every biological system on the planet. There's some great resources here for you to look at. Dr. Cindy Russell, who founded Physicians for Safe Technology, put out this Wireless Silent Spring article. And this one has been around for decades now. And our poor pollinators, you know, all of our birds, our bees, our butterflies are all meant to be synchronized to the Earth's electromagnetic field. But we have introduced this massive layer of man-made radio frequency. And now it's dysregulating the natural systems that our critters have to get back to the hive, to get back to the nest, to do what they need to do. We're dysregulating their own navigation systems. And then for those concerned about climate change, we should know that there was a Greenpeace analyst as far back as 2012 who indicated if the cloud were a country, it would be the 5th largest consumer of energy in the world. So with everything that we've been talked into for technology and innovation, we're not being given the full picture. The mineral extraction, crimes against humanity that go on down in the Congo and elsewhere to get all the minerals for our phones, the data warehouses, the networks, all of our personal devices. They want us to keep streaming, and look who's buying up the streaming industries and the entertainment industries. It's the wireless industry. Every time we send and receive and we charge and recharge all of our devices, we are using energy constantly. And then we've been sold on all these wonderful apps that honestly we probably don't really even use, but in the background, they're back there doing updates constantly and using energy. So all these little things we can become aware of and then learn to make our personal choices. So when I was first figuring this out, I kept scratching my head going, look, if this is as bad as what I'm reading in the peer-reviewed scientific literature, surely somebody's got to have our backs on this. Why don't we know? And then in 2015, Harvard's Law School Center for Ethics came out with this incredible 59-page report that's free online called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And, you know, I was just a good doobie going about my life, raising my family. I wasn't all that politically involved. But it was when this Captured Agency report came out that shows there's a revolving door in our federal agencies and these big, powerful industries. There is nobody protecting us at the federal level. We are captured by industry with this revolving door. So it's up to you and I to learn and to use our voices, because that's what empowers our federal agencies to act on our behalf. So that $30 million study that our Food and Drug Administration commissioned, they're the ones who commissioned that National Toxicology Program study. It's their job, once it was determined that this has clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, it's their job to turn that into public policy to protect you and I. Instead, the gentleman who heads up the radiation area at the FDA today, not the same people who did the study 20 years ago, but Dr. Jeffrey Shuren, who's in charge today, he went over to the FCC and said, keep doing what you're doing, nothing to look at here. And one would ask, what would ever possess Dr. Shuren to do that? Well, again, you can't take things at surface value. You have to go look. And once we look into Jeffrey Shuren's background, we find that he's married to a woman who's a partner in a law firm that represents the wireless industry. So he should have no bearing on any of the science because he's got conflicts. So that's all the bad news. Now let's talk about what we can do, right? In my home, knowing what we know, I've chosen safe technology. And that just means running your signals back through cables. On the back of your router, there are Ethernet ports. Just get a shielded Ethernet cable, a nice big long one or two, run them to the rooms where you use your technology most. And then if you have multiple devices, you can buy a little Ethernet switch for short money. And then you can plug in as many devices as you want. Each one of these will have its own internet service provider address. So you're actually getting a much better signal because you'll have your own dedicated line rather than sharing all the wireless and losing bandwidth when somebody else needs to hop on. So get your little extender here, get a little Ethernet cable and an adapter for your phone, get one for your tablet or for your laptop or whatever other devices you're using. And who knew you can actually hardwire that iPhone, and then you can do anything you do on the internet safely once you go in and you turn off the antennas in your device. And when I brought this configuration home, my daughter was 15 at the time. You know, 15-year-olds don't want to be separated from the pack. So I felt bad that she had to be my kid and listen to me on this. So I said, okay, honey, plug this thing in, go into your settings, turn off the antennas and see if it works. And so she does, and she goes, oh my gosh, Mom, it's so much faster. And I went, yeah. And in my mom mind, I'm going, and it's a lot safer. and it's more reliable, and your data and your privacy are much better protected. And then she goes, so mom, if I'm running the signal through the cable, and I'm not using wireless, does that mean that it's not eating into my data plan? And I said, that's right, because if she went over budget, we made her pay every month, to cover that expense. So that's how I got a 15-year-old on board back then, was because she didn't want to have to pay out of pocket, but she really appreciated having the faster signal. So step one, simply get the hardware that you need. Step two, plug it all in and turn off the antennas. And then, as we did with my meter, go in and measure, because with 5G and the Internet of Things, they're looking to put these antennas into everything. And so, like, my printer wound up having 3 antennas in it that I didn't know about until I measured. And then I just had to go into settings and turn them off. So it's a good investment to either ask your library to put one on loan or to go in with your friends. This one retails for $385. And there's a scientist up in Canada, Dr. Magda Havas, who's doing a project called Global EMF, or electromagnetic field monitoring. And if anybody wants to purchase this and participate in her study, they're giving a discount down to $308, I think is what I paid for this. So you could go to Global EMF monitoring if you're interested. And I have a slide on that coming up. So let's look real quickly. We've talked about the devices under your control that you can choose to lower your emissions on. But there are also other emissions in our communities that we may not always have control over. And one of those is the utility smart meters for gas, for water, for electric, and for solar. And sometimes even for propane tanks, they'll put these little radio frequency transmitters on. And you don't want to be on the other side of the wall from where these are, because they pulse continuously. I measured mine, 17,000 pulses a day, and you don't want to be anywhere near that. These signals can hop on anything that's conductive, like your house wiring or pipes. And in some cases, if it's not properly grounded, it can turn your whole house into a giant RF antenna. Too many stories about fires and explosions, because it's not like they're sending electricians to come install these things on your home. They're getting people who don't have proper qualifications, and sometimes they're improperly grounded. And again, anything wireless has your data going through the air. So there are huge issues with data harvesting, privacy. And at the medical conference, the doctors were indicating that when these smart meters go in, that's often the trigger for people becoming electromagnetically sensitive with microwave sickness. The industry tends to go into impoverished communities, environmental justice communities. They'll roll out their toxic pilot programs. Then they'll say, hey, look, it worked here. And then they'll roll it out across your state. So it is an environmental justice issue. Jeremy Johnson is an engineer from Silicon Valley, and he and his wife, who's a medical doctor, both wound up extremely ill when a bank of these smart meters went in underneath their condo. So Jeremy gives a really good, highly credible TED Talk on this, 15 minutes, a nice way to learn. So we've got our personal devices, we've got those smart meters, and then the cell towers. So these are the macro cell antennas, the big antennas that started out in industrial parks, and then they started encroaching in. They were allowed to put them up on top of buildings, on the sides of buildings, so long as you can paint them the same color of the building. But the amount of radiation and the harm that they're doing is extraordinary. So it's critical to look at the non-industry funded science, where we find increases in death rates and neurological issues, insomnia, and other adverse behaviors within 500 meters of a cell tower. 500 meters is 1,640 feet. And if you go to this link, it'll take you into my personal research repository called Understanding EMS, where you're welcome to just pound around and go look at the science for yourself. Because again, don't take anybody's word on anything. Go and look and then see where you land. There's also a website called antennasearch.com where you can put in any address and you'll get a fair return on how many cell towers and these big antennas are located within a 3-mile radius of where you are. When I put in the Boston State House, there were so many installed all over Boston that it couldn't give me the 3-mile radius. It could only give me 1 mile. Within 1 mile of our State House, 70 cell towers and over 1,000 of these giant antennas. So we need to become informed of these invisible toxins, and this resource is there for you to learn. And that didn't include all these new small cells that are starting to show up at the curb, literally inside our neighborhoods, right at the curb outside of our bedrooms. 5G just means 5th generation technology. And as I mentioned, the wireless industry and its parent companies are buying up the entertainment industry. They're spinning it as faster entertainment downloads, smart cities, super highways. But in order for 5G to fly, they still have to use the backbone of 4G and 3G. And now they're adding on more microwave radiation with these dinky little millimeter waves that can't travel very far, and they can't go through objects like buildings and trees and snow and rain. So their solution is to cut down the trees to remove any blockages from their signals, which is really bad for our environment. And then they want to put in cell towers literally at the curb outside your home and mine, every 2 to 12 houses. That's what 5G is. And the kicker is US Senator Richard Blumenthal in a congressional hearing with the Commerce Committee asked the industry, so please share with us, how much money have you invested to ensure this is safe before bringing it to market? And you'll hear 2 industry representatives say, we don't actually know of any independent science that's been done to prove it's safe. So Blumenthal says, so as far as health and safety is concerned, we're flying blind here. And that's what the industry's done. Computer World and others are reporting that 5G is a bad joke. It's not even giving us the faster speeds that it keeps telling us it's going to give us. We had plenty with 4G, as it were, but they want to keep monetizing. And in January, Verizon put out a press release that they've now exposed 100 million people to 5G small cells. There's a paper that came out by Dr. Beverly Rubik and Dr. Rob Brown. When they look at the densification of 5G, and then they look at the numbers for COVID rates and COVID deaths, they see a very strong correlation where we have installed 5G and sicker communities with COVID. And that doesn't come as any surprise because we know this radiation is an immunosuppressant and it's a neurotoxin. So the more body burden you put on, the less energy your biological cells have to fend off all of this radiation on top of food chemicals and environmental pollutants. And now you've got a virus on top of it. So it's not a big surprise that we see this correlation. Here's the global EMF monitoring project that we spoke of. You can see Dr. Havas's map where people are logging in what their communities look like. And Deb Hodgson and I went through a couple different towns in New Hampshire and we took some readings. We entered it into the database. And our goal for indoors is to be at 10 or fewer microwatts per square meter. In the outdoor environment, the scientists at a conference in Salzburg indicated that even if we could get to 1,000 outdoors, that would be a pretty good starting place, provided you get to go home and have a clean, safe area to do proper cell repair and regeneration. So let's take a look at what some of these outdoor measurements have been. Again, the goal is 1,000 or less. At the Westmoreland, New Hampshire Fire Department, 417, not bad. Walking downtown in Keene, New Hampshire, getting into the danger zone with yellow. Nashua already in the red. Concord already in the red. Stratham, where there's a big cell tower right on the main strip, 108,000. So these are horrible levels. And then here in Boston, where we've got all this 5G coming in, what looks on Hanover Street, where all of our wonderful Italian restaurants are, this looks to be a beautiful ornate wrought iron light post. This is actually a small cell tower right there at the curb, where thousands upon thousands of tourists go every single week. Right there, walking down Hanover Street with these every few feet. So we're in it already, and it's not good. So that's all the bad news. Dr. Martin Luther King taught us that when we have important changes in society, it comes through 3 channels. One, the public engages, and that's what we're hoping to initiate today, is to just teach people what this issue is, and then we can use our voices. The courts rule, and then public policy catches up. And I want to share some important inroads in all of these. I won't go through all the links that I'm going to share, but I will share my slides with you when we're done. New Hampshire for Safe Technology will post my slides with this video, and then you can go in and dig around. But the most important lawsuit happened last summer. The courts ruled that the FCC was arbitrary and capricious in saying that these public radiation exposure limits are fine. They're not fine. There were 11,000 pages of scientific, medical, and personal testimony evidence entered into the public record at the FCC that the FCC completely ignored. And the courts have remanded it back to them to say, go back and do better, because you need to account for the impact on children and the impact on the environment. So there are many legal actions taking place all over the country right now, and you're welcome to go in and look at these. And then policy solutions, with great thanks to Deb for introducing this issue to Representative Patrick Abrami. New Hampshire put together a bill with very pointed questions. Why have Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, and others already long since recognized this risk, and they walked away? They do not cover damages for radio frequency electromagnetic fields. We talked about that legal fine print. Why does that even tell us to keep this away from us? Why is the FCC dropping the ball on this? And why do we allow 100 times more radiation to our public than other countries do? And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect when you have testing for heat only from one device for 6 minutes or half an hour? That's all the FCC ever did. How much heat would you need? Well, the science shows you don't have to have heat. And the science also shows that it's cumulative. So if you have a classroom with 30 children in it, plus your wireless access points, plus their cell phones, plus their tablets, it's a huge sea of electrosmog, and nobody is protecting our children from that. So we brought in experts to testify in New Hampshire. We got that bill passed into law. And then what the bill did is it formed a commission. And for a year, New Hampshire's highly qualified legislators, doctors, scientists investigated and came up with this incredible report that in the first 17 pages document the corruption with the FCC and the wireless industry and the FDA. And then they make 15 recommendations for transitioning our communities and our homes and our schools to safe technology. So this bill was introduced this January by Representative Abrami. House 1644, it's a bipartisan bill, and it's asking that we stem the flow and not be allowed to put up any more cell towers near where people are. And also to form a registry of harm, because right now so many people are getting sick and they have nowhere to report it to. So there should be a registry of harm paid for by industry. Dr. Kent Chamberlain is the professor emeritus and chairman of the University of New Hampshire's Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And Dr. Chamberlain has done a wonderful 20-minute presentation to show the science why this 500 meters is relevant. they didn't just pull this number out of a hat. It is justified by the epidemiological studies that are happening out in society, as well as by the lab, the in vivo and the in vitro studies. And he shares his slides as well, so people can do the deep dive. And all of the hearings in New Hampshire are transparent, so you can go and listen to the testimonies that have been given. You will listen to the disinformation campaigns that the wireless industry continues to perpetuate. The three big telecom companies were invited to come testify. None of them would come. All they do is they send their lobbyists to spin the disinformation. So please know you're not alone. There are more than 150 national groups registered online with Americans for Responsible Technology. And you may very well find a group that already exists near you at this link. And if not, they have wonderful resources to start a group in your own area, because you don't want to go this alone. The industry has gotten such a head start that, and everybody's addicted to their devices. So it's hard to start this conversation on your own. So get others educated around you and use the wonderful resources that are available for you. So here in Massachusetts, we've got town after town that are addressing this, and you can dig around more in this online. And the city of Boston has filed with the FCC. They've also joined mayors and other towns all across the US to sue the FCC. They didn't win that case, but every legal action raises the level of awareness. We have a small cell policy in Burlington, Massachusetts that requires the industry to come back every single year and recertify every single small cell to make sure it's still operating within legal limits. And when Burlington came up with this small cell policy, the Verizon lawyer withdrew their applications because they don't want to have to pay a fee every year to recertify. So the industry will come and say, oh, this is the law, you have to do it. Well, that's not entirely true. There are many, many things that our towns should be strengthening their bylaws with that make it difficult for the industry to just come steamroll in and put up this toxic technology at close range. So Americans for Responsible Technology has great templates for you to use in your community. And again, you're not alone. Town after town, we're addressing this. In Easton, Connecticut, a grandmother figured out what 5G was, and she talked to her town about it a couple of years ago, and Easton put up a moratorium that says, until it can be proven safe, we're not going to allow any applications in Easton. And then just this spring, they re-upped that moratorium because the industry still has not proven that this is safe. So others all over the world are doing similar actions. Okay. In our schools, we got sold this 21st century classroom thinking that our kids needed to have all this technology. Well, take a look at what Silicon Valley executives are doing. They're sending their children to schools with no technology, not hardwired, not wireless, but no technology, because they know that a child's brain develops best by learning through trusted adults, by learning from their peers and from their environment, not from a screen. So the New York Times did a series of articles showing that they're sending their kids to schools with no technology, and that they're even having their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children. And our friends Patty and Doug Wood at Grassroots Environmental, they're the ones who have the project Americans for Responsible Technology. They've also started another project called Tech Safe Schools, where they've got letters ready for you to give to your schools to open up this conversation about their health exposures and their legal risk exposures for exposing the children and the staff to radio frequency radiation. Because again, there's no insurance for this. So our towns are left holding the liability. So please know there are all these extensive resources here for you to learn more, study at home recommendations from other countries. And then again, for our doctors, they can go out and be trained professionally. Physicians for Safe Technology has all the science teed up. It's a very highly credible resource for doctors and nurses and others to go to. And then for our engineers, physicists, technologists, we have a whole slew of resources for you as well. Okay, so a lot of people are do-it-yourselfers, and it's not that hard to get an Ethernet cable with an adapter, plug it into the back of your router, and then turn off the antennas. That's not so hard. For some people, that's very intimidating. So just know there are professionals who are certified and trained to come into your home and measure the radio frequency and any dirty electricity that may be coming off your wall wiring. They can help you with that. So go to the Building Biology Institute if you'd like. This award-winning film, Generation Zapped, is now available on Amazon Prime, and it won Best Documentary at the DC Independent Film Festival, at the Women's Independent Film Festival. It was chosen as part of the United Nations Independent Film Festival. And it's a great way in 72 minutes to just go back and revisit this issue and learn more alongside your loved ones. Bert Wolf on PBS even did a couple of programs on this recently. And again, here is a toolkit for you to use to start taking meaningful action. All right, so we need to remember that our kids are always watching what we do. And so we need to set limits for ourselves and for our children. We need to model good behavior. We need to remember what we used to do before we sat behind a screen all day long. This poster is a really great reminder of what to do. Get back out in nature, go hang out with real people, go laugh, do some funny things, do some music. But this Earth Prescription is an excellent book to remind us to get back outside. And we get natural healing energy from the electrons from the earth if we remember to reconnect. So lots of great resources here to help us get back in tune with nature and ourselves. So at the municipal level, we have excellent resources for municipal leaders. So when we bring this issue up, we always want to bring the solutions and not just drop it on their laps, because most of our public servants are just good doobies who know nothing about this issue. So we need to hold their hand and help them to learn. This book called Reinventing Wires, The Future of Landlines and Networks is a policy paper out of Washington, D.C., with experts who teach us more than a dozen reasons why wireless is a really bad investment for our communities, and teaches us how to get to excellent future-proof technology with fiber to and through the premises. So again, always measure against the biological effects, not the FCC limits, because we know they don't protect us. And we should aim to get to as low as reasonably achievable. That's the ALARA principle that's already in place with our Centers for Disease Control for ionizing radiation, like the gamma rays and the X-rays in the sun. We would never leave ourselves exposed to any of that 24/7, but that's exactly what we're doing with non-ionizing radiation that the science is showing is very harmful. So let's see if we can get to ALARA. So again, there is no safe level of man-made radiation in the scientific literature. That's the bottom line. As much as we don't want to know it, that is the bottom line. Dr. Linda Birnbaum, who used to head up the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, said there are some really good people at the federal level. There are definitely some captured agencies as well. And it's going to take these state level and local level efforts to push this up to force the federal to do the right thing. So we need people's voices on this. We need to keep working on that bill in New Hampshire. I can be brought in to do education sessions in your community. Folks are always welcome to come back to these free webinars that we're doing twice a month. I actually wrote this fact sheet with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health in 2016. We were told it would be out in 3 months, and it's never seen the light of day. So lots of good resources. So towns would be well advised now to form tech safety committees now that technology is here to stay. It should be a permanent part of how we run our towns. and really work with our towns to make sure that if the industry is trying to force in these utility smart meters, that at the minimum, we have the right to refuse them. They should not be putting a transmitting device on our homes at all, though. And start changing up our buildings. Hardwire, make Ethernet connections available in our libraries, in our schools, in our town halls, in our senior centers. And then tell our towns, don't be afraid to hire a good attorney, because most of our town attorneys are not experts in telecom law, but there are experts like Andrew Campanelli and others who can help. So educate the community, get these forums going, take charge of what's happening to your kids in their schools, and start where you are. If you belong to professional organizations, bring me in. Let's have me be a speaker. Let's have me help educate so we can all make safe technology decisions. For today, though, think about reducing your own exposures. Start looking around and simply noticing what is radiating, and then start with baby steps. Choose airplane mode as the rule and only turn on your devices for short periods of time when you actually need to use it, not just because it's available, right? Create a sleep sanctuary above all else so your body stands a chance of doing cell repair and regeneration while you sleep. And invest in Ethernet cables and adapters, and then turn off the wireless settings. These 3 sheets are from our friends at the Environmental Health Trust. They've got a whole toolbox full of items that you are welcome to use. They're free. You can download them. You can print them up. You can give them to your doctors, your colleagues, your schools. Just know that we are here to help, and there's a lot of information. And we know it's like drinking water out of a fire hose when you first learn, but it really comes down to something so simple. Hardwired technology to and through the premises, and then turn off the toxic wireless. So I'll stop the screen sharing here and want to thank everybody for giving us your time today. We had a lovely turnout, and if there are any questions that we can help with, we'd be honored to do that right now. So feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. Okay.
Nobody? Oh, Beryl.
Beryl, did you have a question? We'll have you unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can hear you.
Oh,
Thank you.
Okay, I'm a very different case. I mean, I don't want to go on and on and on, but I've got I've got EHS from secondhand. Everything's secondhand. I've never owned any of the toys, absolutely nothing. And we have been cut off by the utility for 5 years. And we're plugged into our neighbor next door. And he gives us our fridge and some lights.
Wow.
We've got a wood fire, and that's kept us going. But now in Canada, we're having all sorts of threats. We can't get wood and so on. So we don't know how we're going to get through this winter. And the problem is the doctor next door, who has given us access, you know, with a long cable going through, he's got Parkinson's, and he is not well at the moment. And so we have a huge thing ahead of us, what we've got to do, because David's now 82 and I'm 80. But we're very healthy. I mean, normally we're very healthy, but it's just been this that's hit me. And so there we go. So that's the kind of situation. And if that's Ted Archibald in there, is that Ted James? Hi, Ted. He knows all about us, but we're being very positive. And if we do have to go on to electricity, I just don't know how I'm going to handle it. But thank you so much for all that you're doing. It's just amazing. And I've got people that I'm trying to help. I had an accident in December. I fell on the ice. And I had surgery on the 6th of December, and I now have a rod from my hip right down to my knee. Now, this is a question I would like to ask you because we have a canopy, okay, safe living technology canopy. Now, am I the problem inside this canopy now? I have
No, I shouldn't think so, Beryl, because you're not transmitting radio frequency inside your
Okay.
canopy. You just have a piece of metal in there.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you were exposed to radio frequency, we know that it amplifies around metal, right? But, and Deb, you can correct me on this, but there shouldn't be any additional risk inside your sleep canopy from having a piece of metal in there.
I wouldn't think so if she doesn't have any RF radiation in her place.
And the thing is, I have an Obazan mattress. And, you know, that is that special mattress, no white, no metal, no nothing. And the frame of our bed and everything, I mean, there's just a few screws to hold it all on. So that's encouraging. Thank you so much, everybody.
You're welcome. And I just admire your resistance and your positive resolve. None of us ever imagined this is where lives would be today. So good for you for continuing to find solutions as the challenges present themselves. So,
we've learned perseverance and endurance, and I'm grateful for that. You know, we're much stronger, and all the best to everybody else.
Thank you so much, Carol.
I just have to get back.
Okay.
Cece, Sylvie has her hand up.
Sylvie, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm from Quebec, Canada. I'm living in Boucherville, which is a city that they always want to be, you know, very, how can I say, very intelligent. I battle with the city, but they didn't take my words. Even if I deposit on the city papers, you know, scientific paper a lot. But even though I'm lucky because when I built my own house, so when I built the in the wall there's an aluminum protector against it, and at that time in 1987 I didn't know that I will become electrosensitive, and plus the fact that in my window I have a screen, aluminum screen, so all that stuff helped me. I'm a president of Rassemblement Électrosensibilité Québec, which is an organism, and we are 305 members until now, but we should be 2 million. But anyway, because people, they don't get the idea that their symptoms are linked to the radio frequency. My question, I don't want to go too long. I'm verbomoteur, as I say. But there's another problem, which is the dirty electricity, which is erase the symptoms. So I don't know in United States if your organism are concerned about that, because here, because of the smart meters that erase dirty electricity, plus the fact that in the city in Montreal, there's place where you have 40 smart meter on the wall.
Right, a whole bank of them. Yeah, we have the same issues here, Sylvie. If you speak to a building biologist, they'll tell you that when they go in to do an assessment, they will be checking for the electric fields, the magnetic fields, the radio frequency, and they will do a whole assessment to make sure that there's nothing amiss that they need to fix on that too. So I love that you have an organization already with 300 people. I hope it will continue to grow. You're always welcome to invite people to come to our monthly presentations like this if you think it would help to introduce others to the conversation. So we're just doing the best that we can at the grassroots level to try and keep the information going, because as you say, so many people are suffering and they don't even know to connect the dots to this issue. So thank you for being with us today, Sylvie, and I'm sorry for what you've been through.
I thank you very, very much for all the work you do. I'm following you. And the problem is that our language, most of us in Quebec, especially, they speak French.
Mm,
And what we see is that the people who are on welfare
mhm,
are more affected
mhm,
because they live in really bad area.
mhm.
So probably you have the same problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. Okay, Dorothy, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Am I unmuted now?
You are. Welcome, Dorothy. Nice to hear you again.
Yeah, good to see you. My next door neighbors are putting in solar, and I'm just wondering if I should, be worried or have some kind of precaution to protect me from that,
Um,
the dirty electricity.
yeah, I don't know how to answer that one. That's really more of a building biology question, because I just watched a little 2-minute video this morning that somebody shared with us from Jeremy Johnson. So if you go out to EMF analysis, he has some information on solar systems. One of the considerations that he raised is that the inverter on a neighbor's home could put dirty electricity on the power lines for the entire neighborhood. I don't know that that always happens. I don't have personal experience with that myself.
Okay.
But check in with Jeremy Johnson. I know that he does phone consultations as well. If you
Okay.
need to speak to somebody about that.
All right. Thank you so much, Cece.
You're welcome, Dorothy. Okay, any other comments or questions we might help with? Okay, everybody. Well, you have a super afternoon, a tech safe day if you can. And we look forward to, you're welcome to come back in July. I know even with the Film Generation Zapped, I've co-hosted literally dozens of screenings. And every time I watch that movie again, I pick up something new. So we're happy to have people come back and come to these education forums time and again, if it helps you to learn, or if it helps you open a door for somebody else who may benefit from knowing about technology safety techniques. So feel free to come back, bring people, use this as a way to educate your towns. We're not doing it just for us, we're doing it for you.
Right.
So Deb, any final thoughts?
I was just going to thank everyone for attending. I know a lot of people scatter for the summer, and happy to see everyone here, and so grateful, Cece, that you still hang in there with us.
Well, we haven't fixed it yet.
Oh, hi. Oh, hold on.
Okay.
I just put myself on video because I hadn't, I just left myself muted. I have a story from our neighborhood if anybody is interested. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Mhm.
And about 2 weeks ago, a Verizon contractors tried to put up a small cell tower on a corner a couple blocks from me. And the owner who lives on that corner ran out and chased away the contractor and said, "We don't put this here, we don't want it." And then a week later, they tried to come back again and put it up. And that time there were 12 of us neighbors that stood around the post and prevented the contractor from installing the small cell tower. It's if they put it up, it was going to be right outside the window of a woman who has MS.
Oh.
And all of us, all of the people in the neighborhood have little kids, and we're all, worried about our health. And so the contractor, when we gave this it was very peaceful and calm demonstration, standing around the 12 of us, standing around the post. The contractor got really mad, called the police. The 3 different police officers came, first the beat cop, and then the sergeant, and then the lieutenant, and they allowed us to stop the installation of the small cell on the corner until the issue gets resolved with our local government. And we're working with our city council president, and our senator is very interested and was very upset. Scott Dibble was very upset that the legislation was pushed through so quickly without any consideration for health and safety. So we're working with our local legislature, but I just thought everybody'd be interested in the story about boom, we just refused. We refused. And I think that Verizon is gonna give up on this corner. That's what we're hoping. I don't know.
That's fantastic, and congratulations. And I love that you emphasize peaceful assembly.
Oh, we were calm as cucumbers. Nobody
Are
was
you documenting it? Are you, every time you do that, videotape it and document it? Because they may turn around and say, oh, you guys were threatening and wild. And so you need to cover your backside at every turn.
Yeah, we were extremely peaceful, and I believe that that's the main reason why the police officers sent the contractors away and said, you know, we got to resolve this with the local authority, with the local government authorities. And we were the contractor was the person who got mad. We were all just like, la 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 la. We're hanging around. We're just standing here. We're just standing here. That's it. We don't
Well, I feel so bad for the guys who work in the industry because they're just trying to make a living.
Yes.
And they must have this conflict internally going on because they know, you know, I stopped.
They sure do know. They do know. One of the guys said, you know, he blessed us. He said, keep up the good fight. One of the workers did.
Excellent.
So I guess and I want to hear what else you have to say about, you know, going in a good direction for Minneapolis. But I just wanted to say that this seems to me to be so positive and hopeful that so many people already know about it and they're just waiting for a spark. I mean, it just took this little spark for our neighborhood to have 12 people just boom, come out of their houses and join and say, no, we don't want this here.
How did you get the 12?
Oh, they just have it. Most of us work out of our houses these days, and everybody is in contact with everybody else. And they just saw what's happening out of their windows, and they said, "Hey, what's going on?" "Oh yeah, we don't want this here." And they just everybody just spontaneously came together. Was not organized, but now we're getting organized.
Excellent. Oh, congratulations! That just made my day.
Yay!
Right? We need so many more of these good stories. Yeah, because in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, the industry just blew right through police tape. You know, they were just horrific. And they had the audacity to tell Courtney Gilardi and her neighbors that they're just the cost of doing business, they're collateral damage. So yeah, it can go both ways. So I'm just delighted to know that you guys had a peaceful resolve, and maybe it'll lead to strengthening your local zoning ordinances so that they can't do this the next neighborhood over.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm really encouraged to hear that your senator is starting to take an interest in this. So if there's anything we can do to support you there, just let us know.
I think I will. Scott Dibble has actually written a bill that he's, you know, it might take a little while to convince the legislators in Minnesota because the industry put through a bill that they just basically didn't consider health and safety whatsoever. They just listened to the hype from the industry and thought, oh, yay, this is going to be great for business. We're going to get this, we're going to get that. And then just passed it. And Scott Dibble is very aware of the biological harms to the people. Good. So yeah, there's some hope. And I want to put out hope too, because I'm thinking that that awareness is growing, and that I think even if they put all of these things, you know, the more they put up, we as soon as we pass laws that say we will not put up with this risk and harm, proven harm to our health and safety, which is take them right back down again. Just take them off, take them down.
That's what one would hope.
Yeah.
Best to fight them in advance because getting them taken down can be nearly impossible at this point in time.
at this
But
point.
we know everything changes. So keep doing what you're doing and sharing the good stories. If Senator Dibble has introduced a bill to talk about health and safety, can you forward that to me?
I will, for sure, certainly.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions folks would like to share? Okay. All right. Everybody.
I'll just say one more thing, and that was off of what Mary said, is that if someone's sitting there and thinking, well, I can't do anything. I don't know anybody. I don't know what to do. Just like Mary, and it happened with me. I thought people would laugh at me, which they did, and thought I was crazy and a conspiracy theorist. And the person who I didn't think would take me seriously absolutely did. So people surprise you. You just have to keep going and be hopeful, always hopeful. So thank you.
All right. All right, everybody. Well, you have a great afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, Cece.
You're
Take care.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank